Welcome back to another quick tip tutorial here for Effex. And today I would like to show you how to create subgrid turbulences that we just reintroduced in the latest version. And the first thing I do here is create one of the preset scenes, which is the wind and temperature driven smoke simulation. And when I play it, you can see the smoke is moving to the x-axis or along the x-axis. And I lowered the maximum substeps because it will calculate faster that way without substeps, so I can see now what it does. Alright, it looks pretty fine, but I would like the smoke to rise a little more. So I go into the dual force buoyancy and change the rising parameter down here to 0.02. Let's play it again and we can see that the smoke is now rising much faster and gets a nice motion that way, a little puff there. Alright, so this is, let's take this as our ground truth. You can do this with any of these simulations, it's just the same workflow. And the first thing we need to do is to cache our simulation. So we go into the cache wizard and click collect all cacheable nodes. And I remove the two channels, smoke and temperature, because I don't want them to be cached. I just cache the velocity field, which is directly inside the gaseous phenomena fluid dynamics node. Alright, and I also changed the path to my cache folder. Select destination folder and just choose one. I prepared one for this. We also give it a name, in this case velocity low. So I know it is the low resolution velocity. Also make it being compressed when it is saved. And I click the setup cache nodes to actually create the cacher. Alright, everything is done and I can just hit play and it instantly starts to cache my smoke simulation that I've set up. And we're using a low resolution because we want more control and faster results in guiding our smoke as we want it. This is actually just faster in the low resolution. And we can then add turbulences and high frequency details. So okay, it's ready and I switch to load mode. That's all I need to do and just play it again and I see that the velocity cache has been correctly cached. It's a little faster now with the cache loading, but the smoke and temperature channels are still transported, so it is still not in real time, but much faster. Okay, so now that we have our velocity cache, I can turn off all the forces because I don't need it anymore. All that rising, etc. has been done already. Also make sure I have the substeps at 0, so because we don't have any substeps for a velocity calculator anymore. Alright, so now we need to create the turbulences, and I created this particle group now for the vorticity particles. And what also do we need? We need a particle emitter, particle grid emitter. I choose, put it down here with below the particle group, and just assigning all the necessary things like the volume I would like the particles to be created in. Just turning this off. The particle group I've just created, and we also create the particle emission settings, all this via the Canet button, and we have the liquid particles created here, so I changed this particle type to vorticity particles. I go into the emission settings, and as we have vorticity particles, we need a vorticity vector, and we can add this at emission time with an alignment node. So I created it here. We also take the duration from the smoke emitters because we only want particles to be created when smoke and temperature is created. So go into the alignment options and I would like first of all to take the sphere here to take the space from. So alignment mode should choose the sphere position as the center for the directions we create. Okay, so now let's change the direction mode to, let's just choose spherical, so all the particles now have a vorticity vector that is pointing out of the sphere actually. Okay, So that's all we need for our vorticity particles emission. When I play it, we can see that they're moving along the flow or with the flow, and that's how it should be. Turn it off. Alright, so the next thing we probably would like to do is now create the particle turbulence force, that is adding the turbulences, the high frequency details, to our cached flow. It's now in here. I go into the settings and let's just put it below the particle group because I kind of belongs to this one now, and I'm playing in these settings all the time, so let's just do this. Okay, so but for subgrid turbulences we now need to refine our grid. So I changed the global voxel size. I doubled the resolution by putting it to 0.2. 0.4 was the resolution we cached the velocity field with. But I also have a lot of particles here, so I use a constrained noise to lower the particle count. I drop it here in the particle grid emitter, and in the setting of the noise I just use a low clip, you know this from Cinema 4D, and we can see that more particles are now deleted. We can just that way control how much particles are actually created. And as we don't have any substeps, I know that this value that I'm creating is per frame actually. So now we have 14,000 per frame. It's quite a lot actually. So let's go a little higher again and put this to a more, well, comfortable value. 2,000 per frame. That's looking nice actually. Okay, so let's just look at the settings of the particle turbulence, and currently I'm about to change that, but we need quite a high intensity when we're working with subgrids. And just playing this to see if there's any result, and keep that particle turbulence settings, and I increase the intensity once more, but I just noticed that we need the particle group still assigned. That was actually my fault. So don't make this mistake yourself. Anyway, so now it should all be applied, and we can see we are working with 50,000 particles now here currently. Let's go to the top, and I just would like to show what the influence radius actually means. And we have an influence radius of 4, which is in voxels. So 1, 2, 3, 4 voxels is the radius. And if we span that with the mouse, it's quite a big area. So each particle, each vorticity particle, would check for neighbors in this radius and calculate the actual physical turbulence force, or vorticity force actually. And this is a lot with 10,000 actually. But we can already see an influence there. So let's turn off the particle group so we can see the smoke actually. And we already have some turbulences and some details, frequencies here that are added to the flow. We get a lot more details now, just like this, and without the requirement to run a full simulation. But what we do is we change the stretch maximum. This allows more stretch vectors, and we can see this has a dramatic effect on the subgrid turbulences. We get a lot more and more intense values here, so let's just lower this intensity from 10,000 to, let's say, 5,000. And you can just play with these settings, you know, to get the result you want. I also increased the influence radius a little bit to get more feature size of the turbulences. So this looks pretty nice already. We get some nice billowing motion here already. Cool. So we got pretty straightforward results here easily. We should also probably work on our shader. But first thing I will do now is I increase the resolution even more. So it's now 4 times the resolution of our cached velocity field. And I also changed the upsampling interpolation from the cacher to cubic. This is much better, a little slower, but much better flow is reconstructed for higher resolutions that way. Okay, so we can see we have a dramatic effect here again. So I lower the stretch maximum because we have lower voxels now. So the size of the voxel is kind of linked to the stretch maximum and minimum. And we can see that we get very, very small details now here with an influence radius of 4. If we render this, let's just add a light in here, which is of course also, just as in any Cinema 4D scene, as important as anything else. And this looks more straightforward, but let's just go to our shader and change some stuff. We have a multiplier for the density here, which will give us a more dense appearance, like this. But I don't like to use it actually that much. I do it anyways after I have changed the scattering options. But I could also just change the gradient here for better visibility. But let's just check the scattering absorption here, which also gives a denser appearance, but it keeps it smoother, kind of smoother here, as you can see. So I always start with changing the absorption first, and then probably keeping it in harmony with the density multiplier, you know, just playing with these settings like that. But we can also add some more self-shadowing here. Let's put it to 60. As probably we'll get now, there's a very dark appearance. I could lower this a little more, like this. That's all right, just to get the details more visible. I also add here a fluid dynamics for render time advection, which will give us more detailed edges. But you got to be careful with this one. Could be a little too strong. And let's just also change the minimum step sizes here and maximum step size to get more quality in our rendering, especially for thin features. I could also add a double the voxel resolution for the renderer again, so this is a little smoother and some artifacts disappear like that. Let's change the influence radius for more bigger feature size of the turbulences. And this looks pretty cool already. I probably now could increase the stretch maximum again. Maybe, I don't know, 0.4. With the stretch maximum, the vorticity will be stronger, but also vortices will fold faster actually. That's why we get very nice billowing motion that way. And this looks great already. Oh, now we can see the effect of the render time advection. It was definitely too strong. It looked weird. So if I put it down to 4, this looks much better. We still have the details being captured nicely and also pretty sharply. So be careful with that value. Also change this one to 8, maybe getting even bigger vortices there, and also notice 17,000 particles per frame. So I lowered this, and this has an effect on the subgrid turbulences actually. We get the bigger vortices now much more visible with a lower count. So this is sometimes even preferable if you want to create different scales of vorticity. So like this, I could add big features and then add another particle grid emitter with another particle group and another particle turbulence object to add smaller ones afterward. So it's like a layering system of turbulences that you can completely control with particles. Now let's just lower this a little bit, and I would also like to show you that we can use a different fall-off kernel, a spiky one. And this has just a different kind of turbulences being added. And this time it's pretty spiky. You can also see that turbulences and the result will be pretty messed up, pretty spiky. So the kernel is also very important to create a certain look, so you should just play with the kernels and see which output fits your needs the best, or the type of smoke or dust you're creating. Like this, it looks very detailed now. And we also have custom kernels, so you can use a spline graph. But I just lowered the stretch maximum a little bit more. So this looks a little smoother in its turbulent details, but still looks chaotic, like being pushed out pretty heavily. Well, so, and this is how the subgrid turbulences are actually working in Effex. You can see that you can set this up very quickly. You could also make just a preset for that particle group, particle turbulence, particle grid emitter noise constraint that we have here in our scene added for the subgrid turbulences, and that way you have a setup to quickly create your subgrid turbulences for your project or for your simulations. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial, and next one coming soon.